everyone, I'm Margie O'Brien, and welcome to Open House. Well, as you all know, roadworks has been signed into law, and now it is time to get busy in Rhode Island. What does this mean for Rhode Islanders? Well, that's what we hope to discuss in the next half hour. Joining me now is House Speaker Nicholas Mattiello. Thanks for being here.
Margie, thanks. It's great to be on the program again, and I think this is a great program just to explain to Rhode Islanders in an average, in a simple way, exactly what it means for them. And,
sure.
I think it's actually going to mean good things for the state. So.
Well, there are a lot of questions still, and we're hoping that we have wonderful guests here who can provide some of the answers. Jonathan Womer, Director of the Rhode Island Office of Management and Budget. Thanks for being here.
Absolutely. Great to be here.
And a very familiar face on television a lot these days. Peter Alviti, Director of DOT. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
So why don't we really get into some of the questions that people have. We know the project is ongoing. It's out the gate. Has the horse left the gate, Director?
It has. It has, I'm glad to say. We were in anticipation of the bill passing. We had prepared a number of contracts, both for the design and construction, to be ready and hit the ground running when the General Assembly passed the law. The very next day, we released the request for proposals for 4 engineering contracts that have to do with everything from the gantries, the tolling gantries design to Route 6 and 10, preliminary engineering, and EPA regulatory kind of applications. And we're in the process now of putting out to bid in the spring about 24 bridge projects that are the very beginning of the ramp up of the roadworks that the roadworks bill will allow us to do. So we're busy, and we're hitting the ground running.
Well, I think that people are looking already. They're driving down the roadway and looking for your DOT trucks. Mm-hmm. Can you give us an idea of when the first gantry will go up in the state? What it will look like? How does it work? I think a lot of people think they're going to have to stop at a toll booth, and that is not the case.
Yes. So you're right. There's been a lot of, I think, misinformation out there regarding exactly how it's going to work. First, the 14 gantries that are going to be constructed are going to be built in relation to 14 bridges that they're going to be funding the reconstruction of. Of course, during the 10-year period, we're rebuilding over 700 bridges, but 14 of them will be funded directly by the tolls. And we expect that as I said, 2 of the engineering contracts that we're putting out for advertisement for companies to bid on will do the design of those gantry systems and the equipment that goes on them. So we expect to have the designs done and the gantries constructed in about 1.5 to 2 years.
Now, Director, just so that we're clear, so that the public understands,
yes,
these are not toll booths.
Mm-hmm.
There's no slowing of traffic, and they're high overhead, so the average Rhode Islander is not even going to see the gantries. Is that accurate?
Yeah, well, that is accurate, and you're right. I think that is a source of confusion on many people's part, Speaker. I think people think traditionally of tolling locations as the old booths where people collect coins or money from you. These will be entirely automated. So their appearance, actually, you won't even know you're driving under them. It doesn't impair the speed of the vehicles going. Vehicles just flow under them. They look much like the trusses that you see along the highway that hold up our signs. You know, the signs that say exit here or that. The gantries themselves look like those sign trusses, except on them will be that automated equipment that will allow the electronic systems, radar, camera, to be able to identify the kind of vehicle, classify it, identify it, and bill it, all automatically, transparent to most people.
Okay, and my understanding is that it only sees large vehicles, and then as the vehicle gets closer, it focuses in on the Class 8 tractor-trailer trucks. towing a trailer.
Exactly. There are several different forms of electronics that'll be on these gantries that'll perform all of those functions, and it'll perform it as the trucks move by automatically. And it's pretty amazing technology, but in fact, the technology has progressed considerably since in the last several years.
Yeah, I think it's very important so that the average Rhode Islander knows that it's not going to slow traffic. There are no toll booths, no congestion, and absolutely no impact. I was talking to an attorney friend in court just yesterday, and she said, "Is it going to slow me down?" And I said, "No, it's not." She said, "Oh, then I'm all for them." And she was happy. As long as it wasn't going to slow her down, she's more than happy with the roadworks plan. In fact, she was enthusiastic about it. But so thank you for clearing that up so that folks know it's not going to impact them on
Absolutely
on our roadways.
not. In fact, that's because the technology is at the point that it is one of the reasons that we initially started looking at it as an alternative funding source. If it meant that we were going to be creating congestion, it's counterintuitive to do that kind of a thing on a highway. So these technologies are well-founded and advancing quickly to the point where you're not even going to know you just passed one.
Now, before these can get built, there's obviously monies necessary.
Yes.
Who's paying for the gantries to be built? Who's paying for some of these other road projects that you were talking about?
So,
and Jonathan, this is where you might come in too.
Absolutely.
So there are really three sources of funding for all of this: a mix of state and federal funds. There are the state funds that we get on an annual basis that the General Assembly approves our budget for, that come from registration fees, gas tax, etc., fuel tax. Then there's a source of funds that comes from the federal government. A little more than half of the money that we use on projects is federal grants. So you've heard us talking about the FAST Act and that. So that money comes from the federal government. And now the new third source of funding will be the tolls themselves. And they will help provide a long-term, stable state funding source to match all of these federal funds that we get and enhance them. So I think that's another misconception, Speaker, that people might have, that the tolling revenue is a relatively small portion of what we need to accomplish the mission of roadworks. It provides us the ability, long-term, to meet the needs of our transportation system, and in the short term, helps us fund that surge that you've heard us talk about that we need.
Let's talk about infrastructure funding for a minute, because what you see, and this is something that my wife actually complained to me about. She said, folks don't understand. Does our gas tax go into the general fund? Because she sees a lot of comments on Facebook. So, Jonathan, can you help us with that?
Absolutely.
What happens with the gas tax, and why do we need additional funding?
Absolutely. Well, so to harken back to the question earlier and to link it all together, if a lot of nonprofits have done studies of Rhode Island and other states and how much state funding is put in versus federal funding, and we're close to the bottom in the amount of state funding we're putting in right now. Depending on who you ask, we're tied for the bottom or second to the bottom for how much state funding we put in relative to our infrastructure needs. So, I mean, right there you can see, just benchmarked across the entire country, that we have a deficit in our needs on infrastructure funding to begin with.
Compared to other states.
Compared to other states across the country.
Which puts us at a competitive disadvantage.
Absolutely.
When we figure that we have the worst infrastructure in the country, and that's important to businesses. It's important to attracting businesses. And obviously, we don't want to be at a competitive disadvantage. So, let's please. Sorry to interrupt you. Please. What happens with the gas tax?
Certainly. So, some monies are going to DOT from the gas tax currently, and it's about 34 cents is the gas tax. It's generating about $150 million. But we also are funding a couple of other things out of that right now. So it's going to RIPTA, our bus transportation system. It's getting around 45 of that million. It's also going to the Turnpike and Bridge Authority, which gets a large chunk of the money. And that leaves DOT with about $85 million going to it. And it is using it. But you have to remember, they're paying debt service on a number of bonds for the past. There's about 56, 57 million that's going from that. Right. And that doesn't leave a whole heck of a lot left to do even the basic maintenance that the director was talking about. There's about $99 million dedicated to maintenance that needs to activate in this fiscal year to maintain these bridges.
Correct.
And the 29 from the gas tax, even though it's all being spent on infrastructure, none of it's going to the general fund. It hasn't done that in 7-8 years now. We're woefully short from where we need to be.
So just to summarize, the gas tax does go exclusively to infrastructure
Absolutely.
or transportation needs.
Absolutely.
RIP is a transportation need.
Yep.
And not into the general fund.
That is absolutely correct.
It's just not enough.
It is just not enough.
And that's interesting because I actually didn't realize that Rhode Island is near the bottom, if not last, in state contribution towards infrastructure.
Yeah, the Tax Policy Center and Pew Charitable Trust, they both do rankings of the states and how they match up. And they do them slightly differently, so we're either bottom or second to the bottom. But either way, it clearly shows you we are woefully short on how much money we're spending at the state for transportation.
It also makes us less competitive, Speaker, in acquiring grants from the federal government. You've heard talk lately about, particularly in the case of Route 6 and 10, there is a new grant program that the Federal Highway Administration has for projects of regional significance. Now, Route 6 and 10 is a perfect project to be funded by that. But part of the competition that goes on among states is how much is the state itself willing to put up to support that additional grant that they're getting. And the normal means, just using the tax from gas as a means to show our investment, isn't enough to make us competitive many times for those kinds of grants. So an additional amount of state revenue going directly to transportation will make us even more competitive in getting more money from the federal government.
So the tolling gives us a predictable, reliable revenue source into the future.
Yes.
It helps us with the problem of being an outlier and being last in state funding for infrastructure. And 60% of those revenues come from out-of-state truckers and not Rhode Islanders. I mean, it seems appealing.
That's the way it works out. I mean, and when you consider if you're going to fairly assess a fee to people using something, you pretty much should assess it on the basis of how much they're using it. And in the case of bridges and roads, it goes to how much wear and tear they're putting on it. That's the use of those structures. And in that case, it's not only provides that source of income, but it's fair because the larger vehicles are the ones that are using up those resources, those transportation resources.
And 60% of those larger vehicles are from out of state.
That's
so if
correct.
they're going to be using our roadways and helping and causing the wear and tear on our roadways, they should contribute just like they do in just about every other state on the Eastern Seaboard.
Exactly.
So, I mean, it seems to make sense. And from my perspective, I thought it was very appealing and good policy to have out-of-state truck drivers contribute 60% of the revenue, the added revenue that we need in Rhode Island, versus one way or another Rhode Islanders contributing that. I mean, from a Rhode Island standpoint, I think that's absolutely good policy for our taxpayers.
Well, they already are investing a lot, Speaker. The taxpayers of the state of Rhode Island are investing more than their fair share already through the gas tax and the registration fees that they pay. They're already investing in our infrastructure. Who isn't, as you said, is some of the heavy commercial users, and some of those, as you said, are from out of state. They're paying, those out-of-state trucking companies are paying in every other state that they pass through. In fact, just yesterday, the Congressional Office of Budget came out with a report that says tolling, as opposed to a gas tax, is the way of the future for this country in terms of funding infrastructure. So it's becoming more and more a practical, reasonable, and fair way of funding the infrastructure.
Well, I know that a lot of the reps were talking about other state media were contacting them to see what was going to happen in Rhode Island. All eyes are watching here. And I wanted to clarify something else, that this revised version of Roadworks did change the dollar amount for tolls coming in. So the max is for a truck to come up through 95 paying a $20 max toll. Director, do we have an idea of what we can be expecting annually as far as toll revenue?
We're expecting the toll revenue to generate about $45 million a year.
And that money is really going to just be used to reinvest in our roads?
It can only be used.
Can only be used. That's another myth out there. And I think they all thought we were getting raises with this.
No, the federal law says that we can toll a bridge for the purpose of reconstructing that bridge. Now, once the needs of that bridge have been met by the tolling revenue that's collected, we can use it, but only for other transportation-related funding. We can never use it to go to the general fund. We can never use it to go to any other programs in the state. It can only be used for infrastructure improvement in transportation. So when the Speaker said it's a dedicated source of funding, it's going to be dedicated for all time just to transportation purposes.
Now, when we talk about the amount of the toll margin, we say $20. I don't want to leave the impression that it's $20 per gantry. Right. It's $20 if a truck enters one end of the state and goes all the way through. It's maximum one time per day. And each gantry is going to be roughly $2.50, $3, $3.50 the most. I mean, they're not going to be $20 per gantry, correct?
No. The average is $3.
Okay.
$3 at each of the tolling locations.
And the per mile toll cost in Rhode Island is going to be about 47 cents, much less than most other states. In fact, significantly less.
It's half of all the other states along the eastern seaboard.
Okay.
Let's talk about some of the positives besides the fact that we'll have great roads and infrastructure. Our reputation will improve. This will give jobs to Rhode Islanders. This huge project.
Yes.
You're looking about 6,000 at this point right now?
Yeah. I believe that's as a result of a REMI economic impact study that I requested, about 6,000 net jobs over the next 5 years. Now, those are net jobs, not total jobs, but that's a significant amount of jobs created. That's going to be the shot in the arm that Rhode Island needs, and that economic activity leads to other economic activity. So this is going to help a lot of different industries out, be very good for our economy. According to the REMI report, our gross income goes up, the wealth of Rhode Islanders goes up, our unemployment rate goes down. So this is overall very positive for the state of Rhode Island. And more significant than that, Margie, it's that Rhode Island's at a competitive disadvantage right now with other states. Two of the things that companies look at when determining where to relocate is education and infrastructure. And what I've learned recently is infrastructure is the most important factor that companies look at. Well, when you're last, and right now Rhode Island is last in infrastructure, you get crossed off the list without further consideration. So we are at a disadvantage to other states that actually impose tolling and have good roads. So not only do they collect the toll revenues, they improve their infrastructure, and they beat us in getting the companies because Rhode Island's at an economic disadvantage. I cannot imagine any Rhode Islander that would want to be in that situation. It's a losing proposition for us. That's been the case for too long. This is going to give us that predictable, steady revenue source so that Rhode Island will make its fair investment. The 60% of the new revenue will come from out of state, which is fair to Rhode Islanders, tax relief to Rhode Islanders, and we will be more competitive. Once we shore up our infrastructure, Rhode Island's not going to be at an economic disadvantage, and we're going to be in better position to attract new companies and to grow jobs. That's very important to companies right now. They don't want to go into a state and then be faced with the proposition of having to fund bridge repair. They want to know that the bridges are safe, secure, and will serve their economic needs. And we are going to put Rhode Island in a position that we are very competitive in that regard. So I'm very pleased about that. This is going to be very good for Rhode Island's economic future.
I mean, our bridge condition is last in the country. I mean, can you imagine what would happen to our economy if we hadn't done something bold like this?
Right.
I mean, our bridge condition, how can you get worse than last? But you can, right? I mean, God forbid we had an incident as well. I mean, imagine that impact on the economy and what it would do.
I think, too, the long-term effect of this. We're talking, a lot of the discussion around road works and the tolls goes to bringing ourselves into a state of good repair in the next 10 years. But if we look beyond that, which the companies, Speaker, that are looking to move into Rhode Island are not just looking for us to fix our bridges in this next 10 years, but if they're moving a major facility in here, they want to see a state that is willing to make a continued investment into the future so that 10 years from now, we don't revert back into the same state of disrepair. They've moved their business here, and now they're stuck with a bad infrastructure again. The kind of funding that we've set up through this new legislation will be continuous beyond the 10-year period and will show to these companies that Rhode Island is making a commitment to long-term fund our infrastructure and keep improving it and keep it in a good state of repair even beyond this 10-year period that we're talking right now. And that's the kind of transportation system, a reliable kind of funding that these companies want to see.
And Director, you had new hires for your department. Yes. Are these people, have they come from other states that have already gone through this sort of project? Are they bringing expertise to Rhode Island now that Roadworks is starting?
Yes. So there's a massive reorganization that's going on, and the House and Senate last budget session passed the mandate to us basically that said reorganize in a new way of doing things, project management based, and reorganize with a number of the top positions being reclassified or unclassified positions that have a certain accountability attached to them. And we're in the process of doing that. We're not just going to be rebuilding bridges, we're going to be rebuilding DOT. And we're always looking for new talent. We have a lot of good talent here in the state. In the creation of Roadworks during the last year, it's become evident to me that people within DOT with a lot of talent emerged and became leaders and produced a wonderful product for us. Going forward in some of these top positions, undoubtedly we'll be taking talent from out of state. We, in the last several days, have come to an agreement to select a former Mass DOT person that will be joining us as a chief of staff position. And she brings with her a wealth of knowledge on how Mass DOT operated, and we expect her to be a contributor to the entire Roadworks program. So we're looking both in-house and outside to really recreate and reconstruct DOT into something moving forward. We'll do the same thing for our organization as Roadworks will do for the bridges and transportation system.
Yeah, I think that's of critical importance. From what I hear from folks, they recognize that we have a new governor. They recognize that you're a new director, and I believe they have a lot of confidence in you. But they also want DOT held more accountable and reorganized and actually being more responsive to the citizens of the state. So I applaud you on your efforts and please and encourage you to please keep working on that, because the citizens are asking for it, and I know you're doing a great job. So thank you.
Well, thank you. We hear you. The oversight provisions that were amended to the legislation by you really will go a long way to holding us accountable and transparent. So the reporting requirements, the kind of performance requirements that we're setting will be measured, will be out there in the open, and we actually welcome that. with this transformation inside DOT, we expect it to make some real, visible, tangible improvements to the way that we're able to deliver all of these projects. And we're patterning ourselves in a way that many successful DOTs across the country have. We had the DOT from Utah in not too long ago in a peer exchange. And they implemented the same kind of program out there 15 years ago. And
doesn't it make sense to just follow another successful state's lead rather than recreate the wheel?
Yes.
No pun intended.
They have, so we have 23% deficiencies in our bridges. They have 0. Okay, so yes, we're using the successful DOTs as a model. We'll certainly be implementing it in our own way here to comply with the state laws and that are here in Rhode Island. But this is something that I think everybody realized. And the perception, as you said, Speaker, isn't totally unwarranted when you have the worst bridges in the country and that. So people have a healthy skepticism about how we're going to be able to make improvements and be able to perform. And I think the people, the men and women of DOT are up to the task, and we really look forward to the challenge.
Well, I certainly appreciate that. And having worked with you, Director, I know you're up to the challenge, and the state's lucky to have you, from my perspective, as the Director of DOT. And so I think the good news is we're expecting good things out of the DOT. That department is going to be transformed into a much more responsive department. We're going to go from having the worst bridges in the nation to bridges that are sound and secure for our residents, and we're going to have a sound and secure infrastructure. Because, you know, I look at it from a frustrated point of view sometimes. We've been working over the last several years at reducing costs, reducing taxes. We've reduced our corporate tax, eliminated Social Security tax, eliminated sales tax for businesses to make our businesses more competitive nationally. And I'm hearing from folks that have national credentials that say Rhode Island's being recognized as moving in the right direction, but then you're an outlier on infrastructure, which is the most important criteria for businesses to consider. And that's just discouraging. And it's one of the reasons that, you know, I've applauded you for your desire to fix our infrastructure. We can't be last anymore. Economically, we cannot afford to be last. And we've made a lot of other changes. We're competitive economically. And once we do get our bridges and our infrastructure sound and appropriate to serve our citizens and business needs, I think Rhode Island is on the verge of really taking off economically and being much more competitive with the rest of the nation. So
we're looking forward to changing the reputation. That's great.
Absolutely. That's what we're all trying to do. So thank you, Director.
Thank you, Director, for being here. Jonathan Womer, thank you for being here. Speaker, always nice to have you as my wingman and open house. And we hope that this answered many of your questions about roadworks. Please join us for the next episode of Open House. I'm Margie O'Brien. Have a great day.